So it's that time of year again when a bunch of fundamentalist evangelical Christians just won't shut up about demons. So, in light of that, this week on my channel, we're going to answer the question: is Dungeons and Dragons and other tabletop role-playing games demonic? Fuck no. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube stuff, and remember, indoctrination is a hell of a drug. Oh, 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 the video isn't over. So, yeah, the short answer is no. The slightly longer answer is fuck no, or hell no. But, so, to get in a little more detail, heck, there are certain rather out there, Christians who claim that chess is evil or chess is a terrible thing to play because it's a war game. It's the most abstract form of war that you can have aside from maybe checkers. Because of course every army looks to make sure they have their air superiority with flying horses. But you could say you can make a like you could make a case that, oh, it has magic, oh, it has demons, it must be an evil demonic. No. One, fantasy elements does not the devil make. Well, yeah, that's kind of a stupid thing to say, because fantasy elements does the devil make, because, there's likely no such thing as the devil. So, the devil being a mythological figure is made of fantasy elements, and specifically our modern understanding of the devil is taken from a bunch of, various pagan deities, because the Catholic Church in all its infinite wisdom decided, hey, these pagans, they're digging our Jesus guy, but they won't let go of their other gods. Why don't we just turn him into Satan? But, fantasy elements does not evil make. There's, and, I could point out, Lord of the Rings and the Chronicles of Narnia, which is the, well, Lord of the Rings was written by a Catholic and has some heavy Catholic theming, but in order to avoid panicking the Oxford Seismology Department any further, I will avoid putting any allegorical weight on that, as Tolkien himself, Tolkien very vehemently disliked allegory, or rather disliked purposeful allegory. And being friends with C.S. Lewis, I can see why. Because the Chronicles of Narnia is the most allegorical Christian fantasy to allegory ever since Pilgrim's Progress. So, fantasy elements does not evil make. And even if you did say that a game, even if you were uncomfortable with the fact that a game had demons or magic in it, if you're running a game of, let me let you in on a little secret. If you're running a game of Dungeons and Dragons or any other tabletop role-playing games, now some systems it can get a bit, more problematic because the way the mechanics work actually enforces certain themings. But, and we'll get into that later in the video, but for right now we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and here's a little secret. If you don't want demons or magic in your Dungeons and Dragons campaign, then don't fucking put demons and magic in your Dungeons and Dragons campaign. Just run a low to no magic campaign and use other creatures and monsters, I mean, it'd probably look like Medieval Life Simulator. I don't know, maybe running like a church intrigue campaign, turn it into something like something like a less debauched version of the Borgias, or be the Spanish Inquisition going out and fighting and trying witches. I don't know, that might be an interesting campaign. But here's the thing. Just because material is available to be used doesn't mean it's an intrinsic part of the game itself. Heck, you could take the set of stat blocks, reskin it as something else, and, they're not fighting a demon, they're fighting berserk. Well, there is a separate stat block for berserkers, but they're not fighting a demon. They're fighting a robot. They're, there are golems and Warforged, so, but hopefully you're picking up what I'm laying down. They're not, but there is a slight problem that Dungeons and Dragons and other tabletop role-playing games may have with, that is kind of contrary to the evangelical mindset, and I'm not talking about the fantasy or, occult, quote-unquote occult, supernatural elements. I'm talking about the fact that it's very much an exercise in empathy. It's an exercise in thinking outside of the box. And, for all the claims about our God does not fit in a box, our God does not live in a box. Well, when you censor media so heavily, you're pretty much putting your followers in a box, and exploring other themes, exploring the concept of right and wrong, yourself, that is a dangerous thing to, to an indoctrinated mindset. And, that's even putting aside the fact, that tabletop RPG games can do some good for kids, helping teach math, because you need to add, you need to multiply. You need, especially if you're playing a caster, a lot of the spells have areas of effect, so you get your geometry in there. So it's like, okay, it does damage in the 15-foot cone, so we got to figure out where this, which squares on this graph paper this area will hit. And it, helps with creativity. It helps with social skills, because you're acting out, you're interacting with other people, where you're pretending to interact with the NPCs. And so, it does a lot of good as a teaching tool. But no, it's got magic, and no, it's about thinking outside of the box and being creative, and we can't have that. Of course, they won't admit that bit. It's all about the occults and the demons and the witchcrafts. And, oh, Lord Jesus, protect us from the devils and the demons and the witchcrafts. And especially with a system like 5e, you can make a campaign about anything. And a little teaser for next week, I'm gonna be piloting a monthly series. So one of my weekly shows per month will be set aside to this series. The working title is going to be Dungeons and Divinity, where I'm going to take the Bible, and I am going to take stories from the Bible and explain them as if they were D&D modules or D&D one-shots. Probably gonna throw a few character builds in there. We'll see how things work out. And so we've worked through, Dungeons and Dragons, and the fact that you can make a campaign about anything. And if you don't want to deal with, the occult, if you don't want if you don't like the game because of certain themes, then you don't have to put those themes in your campaign. And now we're going to get into some more, some other games where that's more of an issue. Like, for instance, the World of Darkness. It's very dark, gritty. It's the mechanics and just the mechanics are heavily tied to the theme, where it's a terrible, terrible world, and the players are not the nicest people. In fact, there are a lot of abilities and such that straight up can temporarily strip your player of agency. And so, and it's a more mature game. It's got a very brutal combat system, so I can see why someone would be kind of leery of a game like World of Darkness, where the whole point is modern setting, and you're playing vampires and werewolves and demons. And aside from the fact that supernatural, aside from the whole supernatural occult issue, which shouldn't be a fucking problem, but apparently it is. It's especially for Vampire the Masquerade, it's a system that heavily encourages backstabbing your own party. And you've got to do terrible things, because you've got to make sure that you've got to make sure that the supernatural presence is a secret. So that leads to that leads to things like, killing innocent NPCs and disposing of the bodies, and very dark, disturbing instances, like as a result of the mechanics itself. So I can see why games like that, or games like Call of Cthulhu, which is, heavily tied to Lovecraft, I can see why darker, more violent games could be age-restricted reasonably. But are they demonic? No. Aside from maybe Demon the Fallen, where you're literally playing demons, but are they, will they invite demonic forces into your life to curse you? And no. In fact, they might, tabletop role-playing games might provide a sense of catharsis. Help you work out issues that you're dealing with mentally. I've seen posts about, some, with a picture of a poster in a clinic where it's like, hey, we're using D&D as a group therapy session. Do you want to come join? So, and, none of this is, this is all off the top of my head. What do I know? I'm just an ex-army bloke from the ass into nowhere. But I do know, and especially when it comes to evangelicals and the supernatural, I do know that indoctrination is a hell of a drug. And you've got to stop, and you've got to remember it. Just remember, after you do the like, share, subscribe, the following on the Twitter, the commenting, all the YouTube stuff, you just remember, indoctrination is a hell of a drug.